Hi, this is Corey. Welcome to the C. Jane Build podcast. Today, I am here with Beth Pointer, who is the founder of Done Construction in Baltimore, Maryland, which, full disclosure, my hometown. Love it. Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to have this conversation.
Great. So we are here to talk about general contractors and the process. And as I'm sure you know, general contractors get a bad rap. So many people come off of a renovation project and they are not happy and they are, cursing their contractor and just like complaining over budget, over time, et cetera, et cetera. And part of the reason I got into this business is because I've had amazing experiences with contractors. And
Great.
I've worked with them repeatedly and thought they were amazing and been pretty on time and pretty on budget. And so, it confounded me that so many people sort of didn't have that experience and talked trash or whatnot. And so part of the purpose of C. Jane Build, as you know, is to educate people so that everyone can have a process like I had. So before we really get into the ins and outs of your process, just give us a little bit of background, like where you came from, how you get to contracting, anything else, your favorite snowball flavor. We talked about snowballs, which are a Baltimore specialty. So might as well tell us your favorite.
Egg custard, no doubt. I live in Baltimore. It's egg custard with the marshmallow on top.
I'm a chocolate with the marshmallow on top girl, but
oh, controversial. Starting the podcast off with a fight. So I was a union organizer for the last 20 years and got into this sort of after some burnout. I've been doing some remodeling on the side. I was a union ironworker in St. Louis about 25 years ago and had gotten my journeyman's card and found myself doing organizing with the union and was there, in a couple of different unions organizing for about 20 years. And then 5 years ago, founded Done Construction. Was volunteering at our local tool library, which is a lending library for tools, if folks aren't familiar with them. And group of us remodeling houses sort of on the side were like, we need to have someone with our GC so we can pull permits, deal with the city, whatnot. And was having a particularly bad burnout moment and made the leap somewhat foolishly. And
yeah, what was I thinking?
It's a blessing and a curse working for yourself. So made that leap, started the business with one of my best friends, Ryan, who ended up moving to Hawaii, bless his heart. And so it's been me and my team for the last 4 years without him. So it's 3.5 years, I guess, without him. So.
And you specialize in kitchen and bathrooms?
Yes. Kitchen and baths. We will do for former clients, we will do other projects for them, interior projects. But for new clients, we'll only do kitchens and baths, just, stuff that we are very focused on, very good at, very fast at. And then, if we have a relationship with you as a client, then, we might take on something that's a little different, where we know that the communication and the relationship is going to move smoothly, even if it's not something that is in our wheelhouse.
Got it. So new clients. So how do you usually get connected to your clients? Is it through the clients directly, and how do they find you? Do they come from an architect? I know you will do both sides. You can do both sides of the project. So how do you usually get connected to folks?
Most of our clients come from referrals from other clients through our website or emailing me directly. We don't really do any advertising or use any lead generation at all. We have a designer that we work with regularly, Arch Interiors. Big shout out to them. They're the best. And they bring us some clients. Most of the time, we have the clients and we send them to them if it's going to be a really complicated, particularly kitchen renovation where a lot of things are going to move and we want to make the best use of the space. I like to bring them in to do the design. If things are going to stay kind of in the same location, we pretty much do all the design on a kitchen or bath.
Got it. So I'm a new client. I've come to you. and said, help, my kitchen sucks. Talk me through the process.
So usually send an email. We'd have a little bit of correspondence back and forth about what your timeline is. Um, and if your timeline fits with where we're at in our scheduling and we're taking on new clients, then I'll schedule a meeting, usually 6 to 8 weeks in advance. We schedule our new client meetings. And I do those on Fridays, do 3 or 4 every Friday when we're accepting new clients. And then I go out and we have our first meet and we see how it feels. That's kind of the first thing, is just like getting a sense of whether or not it feels like it's going to be a good collaboration.
I think so. Chemistry is so important. I mean, it's kind of like dating. I mean, obviously there's more involved than that, but
Yeah, it's harder than dating.
absolutely. Well, there's also, you're
I
talking
mean,
about money. You're talking.
yeah, it's the money. It's like, you're going to get into a financial relationship with someone. And we always say that, we show up and it's like the most stressful things. You're dealing with someone's house, you're dealing with change and money. And that's before we've even made a mess, right?
Right.
Before they haven't had to move anything out of the space. They haven't had to go through the cabinets they haven't looked in years, right? Their life hasn't been one bit upset. It's just the like thought of change and spending all of that money. And then we show up. So it's an emotional time for clients, I
And
think.
and not only that, but I would argue in probably 90% of the cases, there's that, and they also have no idea about what they're getting into and what they're
Yes,
supposed to do, let alone what you're supposed to do. Um,
exactly.
so it is definitely a challenge. So,
Yeah, and I
uh,
think just to add a layer, you know Baltimore pretty well, but we've got an aging housing stock, so we've got a lot of complications there. But we also, our clients are almost all middle class folks. They've got enough money to do a big kitchen renovation, but frequently they have that money because someone has passed in their family, or there's been some accident or something that is connected to trauma. And so they've got this chunk of money to spend, but it's got emotional attachments for them too. And so that's like something that we've really had to work through with a lot of clients. It's just like, okay, well, this was your dad's, life savings is going into this kitchen, but like it's not going to be perfect because nothing really is perfect. So like sort of reconciling those feelings of spending your father's life savings on a thing and then having your expectations met it's a challenge for us for sure.
yeah, I can imagine, especially because for a lot of people, but especially those who are, funding in that way, your resources are finite. You're
Yeah,
not, you can't say, okay, we're a little bit over budget. I'm going to go pull some more money out of my home equity line of credit, or however, they're working with a finite pile of money. So I know we're a little bit all over the place, but yeah, talk me through how and when you talk about budget with someone.
almost immediately. So I have them, walk me through the space, tell me what they're hoping to achieve, and then tell me how much they've got to spend. And I just start by saying my prices don't change based on the amount of money you have, but what is possible and how much creativity we're going to need to do is going to be dictated by how much money you've got to spend. So, if you've got an idea that you want to use Zalige tile and you want, all of these like high end finishes, but you don't have a high end budget, then we're going to start talking about setting realistic expectations from the beginning and whether or not we're the right contractor to do that job, because we're not certainly the cheapest out there because we pay living wages and all of those things. But I think getting folks on the right page about what to expect for their money, we have to do that very early.
Yes. I think, and that's also a challenge because, first of all, sometimes people have no idea what their budget is because they have no idea what a kitchen renovation will cost at any level of finish, whether it's a budget kitchen or a luxury kitchen. If you are not in the industry and haven't done extensive knowledge, you might have no clue what your budget even should be,
Right.
which is and no one talks about money. I mean,
Yeah.
not, in our world, it's, you know, you don't talk about how much money you make or, you know, what you spend on things unless you're a show off and you want to like brag to your friends. Oh, I just bought a $7,000, you know, dress, which, I mean, God, please, nobody should be spending that money even close to that on a dress. So that was probably a poor example, but it is such a sensitive subject. And to be able to make someone feel comfortable talking about it it's hard.
Yeah, it's very challenging. And I do think we all need to be talking about money more and more openly, not necessarily about in a braggadocious way, but in,
Yeah.
you know, like what we're struggling with. And so many of us did not get very good education about money growing up from our folks, and certainly from the educational system. So being able to share what's working, what's not working, and then, you know, getting those expectations clear it's a challenge.
Yes, but I love the way you talk about it, that like your what you do and the service you provide, those costs are the costs. And that the wiggle room, if you will, or the place where there can be any variation is on the stuff that you are working with. But, you know, an electrician is an electrician and you can't skimp on that. I think that so many people come at this thinking, well, I'm going to get a bid and then I'm going to negotiate.
Yeah.
And they don't understand. And that's true to some degree because you're right. You can do an IKEA kitchen as opposed to a custom cabinet, but you can't do, you should definitely not do a cheap electrician.
Right. Yeah, and I think that folks need to understand that the negotiation is really mostly with themselves, right? Is like, what are you willing to compromise on in your aesthetic vision or whatnot? That it's not really like the cost for an IKEA kitchen for me to install is actually, frankly, more expensive than it is for me to install a, you know, a semi-custom or custom kitchen. Um, but that, you know, it's about what you're willing to have because the costs are kind of the same for us. You know, if we're gonna, you know, have an electrician wire the new kitchen and plumb a new kitchen. It's like the costs are the same. The only thing that's different is maybe we don't move the sink 4 feet to the left if your budget doesn't allow for it. You know, we accept the framework as it is. But I do think that there's a lot of really bad advice on the internet and just out there in the general wisdom about talking to contractors that really is about how to set up a dynamic where you're in control as the client and that you're negotiating with the contractor from the beginning and saying things like, well, if you do good on this job, I've got a lot of friends and I'll tell them about you, or there'll be more work after this. And that's just a total red flag for me. When someone's doing that, I just walk away almost always. Because it just is like, okay, we're not starting from a place of trust and respect. We're starting from a place where you're trying to manipulate me so that I will give you a lower cost. And, you know, I'm not out here jacking my prices up depending on the client. So I've got to charge what I need to charge for my business to run and for everybody in my team to pay their bills. But I think that there's a ton of information out there that says that that's the way you should talk to your contractor. And I think that is part of what ends up putting people in situations where they're with contractors that don't end up being trustworthy because sometimes the relationship starts with the client not trusting the contractor. And so they're inadvertently turning off a good contractor with some of this rhetoric that is like, you know, it's like common mistaken information out there about how to work with
We'll
contractors.
call that fake news.
Fake news, exactly.
Fake news. That's what we're supposed to call it. I think you're so right. And I think also, you know, a homeowner needs to understand. So they're embarking on this remodel and they are putting together a team that is going to work in partnership with them. And it's not a, you know, I win, you lose, and or I'm going to pull, you know, I'm going to try and get what I can get out of you and pay you the least that I can do. You're going to be with someone for months, if not years, on this project, depending on how involved it is. And it is, I mean, getting back to what we were saying about dating, like it is a relationship. And you're right, you have to come at it with trust and openness. And one of the most important things is the communication, which I want to talk about in a minute. But so let's sort of just jump back for a minute. So you're meeting with a client. Do you prepare and then you prepare bids for everyone? Like, how does that process work for you?
So will give sort of rough numbers in that first meeting, where it's like, okay, this is what you're hoping to do here. Then you should expect to pay between $35,000 and $50,000 for that project, depending on finishes.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're okay with those numbers and want to move forward, we do a $200 estimate fee that is basically just for us to put together a full scale proposal and scope of work. And that is really
I'm going to
just,
stop you right there for a second. I think that's unusual and awesome, and that more contractors should come aboard and charge for an estimate. I think the sooner you can get someone in and the sooner someone can give you numbers, the easier it will be for every homeowner to know what numbers are from the beginning. So I think that's awesome that you also like charge for it because it's your time and it takes a lot of time to
yeah,
put together a
we,
bid.
we do reimburse that 200 if they contract with us, like
Perfect.
in their final bill, which is
Yeah.
great. But it is really, we had so many people just kicking the tires, and it'll take me 4 or 5 hours to put together a full estimate. And so even if I did get that $200 as payment, that's not very much money really for the amount of labor that goes into it. And it's a risk because we're fixed bid contracts. So um, if I tell you this is what the price is and we put in a contract, the state of Maryland says that the price can't go up more than 15% unless there's a change order that is reflected in that. So I have to get those numbers right on my end, because if you accept that contract and sign it, then I'm kind of, you know,
You're stuck with it.
I'm stuck with it. And so I'm going to eat that cost. So I have to really put a lot of time and energy into that proposal to make sure that it's tight and that I'm not missing anything. Which means that I have to sort of sit down with a clear head and do that process. And that's, it's not without a ton of labor on my part.
You're right. And I think so many people don't understand how much time and effort goes into a bid. And I think, absolutely, I do think people should go, meet with and get bids from multiple contractors. I get that. I think people need to figure out who they jive with, how, contractors are going to do different. They're going to do a very different bids potentially. So I do think that stage is important, but I think also the homeowner needs to understand that it's not so easy to just, you can't snap your fingers and put a bid together.
Yeah. I think folks have this idea that we're just like computers, and that we could look at a room and go, this is exactly how much it's going to cost, without any calculation, without looking at what the current prices are, especially with the fluctuation in materials costs over the last few years. It's like, I need to really sit down and look and see, like, okay, well, the last bid I put together was maybe 2 weeks ago. Well, the prices could be radically different. And I don't want to put together a bid that is going to screw either one of us over, not the client nor me, right? I want it to be an accurate read on what the current situation is. And that still said that, like, I'm going to put together a bid, and if we don't do the job for 9 months, those costs might increase, and I'm going to end up eating them to some degree. We do have escalation clause now, but again,
Yeah,
it
I
can
was going to
only
ask
go.
you how you handle that since obviously, costs are such an unknown right now.
Yeah. So luckily, we've got some room for escalation. I have just started to add in contingency. For one, we add in contingency for everything because almost every house we work on is 60 plus years old. Most are 100 years old. So who knows what you're going to find. So having some contingency in there for that, and then also having some price contingency in. And then that gives people a really good state of mind. So they know that this contract, that's going to be the cost. The only thing that goes up is if the client themselves decides they want to add something, which I want to try to get that down before we start, because I don't like doing change orders, I don't like doing paperwork, and i don't I don't like changing the scope of the work once we've started, because we have jobs that are scheduled next, and I don't want to put those clients off because someone decided, oh yeah, can you do this and this and this. And I think most clients think, oh, well, that's more work for you, more money for you. But it's like, yeah, but I don't want to screw over the people in the future.
And also, I think that's sometimes when people start to feel like they're getting nickel and dime because they're like, wait, why are they charging me extra for all these change orders? But of course you are, because it's a change order. So one of the
Mhm.
things I talk about is really, you're right, like trying to get every single thing set before the contract is finalized, so everyone is on the same page and knows what is happening and what the consequences of change orders are.
Yeah.
Sadly, in this world, people can be really demanding. And so you're right. They think, well, no, I just want to change it and you just have to do it. And of course, I have the right to that. And we want to kind of try and get away from that if at all possible.
Yeah. We've been really lucky. Like I said, it's partly because we're basically referral only. And so the folks that are coming to us, they our clients that we currently have, they share our values and they treat us like we're not service. They treat us like we're collaborators and that we're partners. And so we're likely their referrals are going to do the same and already have an understanding of how the dynamic is going to work. Though we have had some referrals that come through and I walk away from them and decide I don't want to take it on because the vibe just isn't right. It's like, oh, this doesn't feel like it's um, going to be a positive one for me. Probably not for them either, but it's a lot of my life and I don't want to spend it feeling miserable.
No, I hear you. And also, I think, we've recommended contractors before, and in some cases, the people we recommended to it doesn't work that well. But when you drill down, and they're like, well, I don't understand. Like, you claim this contractor was so great, but our experience is the complete opposite. And when you look at it, sometimes it's the homeowner's fault. Like in one case, there was a ton of change orders, and we're like, well, this is what the problem is. It's not the contractor. It's
Right.
how you're coming at it.
Yeah.
I think for that particular job we used that contractor for, I had one tiny change order because we forgot on the original plans to put a shower niche in, you know?
Right. Like,
Um,
oh yeah, let's add that. And that's the kind of thing that it happens and I will forget to say, hey, we're going to be doing all of this work right up to the edge of your dining room. Do you want to add painting the dining room? Because it's going to be really obvious that your dining room is, right next to this room that's just like completely perfect. This is the chance to do it. Like trying to think of those things that are going to come up that the client's going to be like, oh, I wish we would have. And so if I can think of those things in advance, then it also, if I can think of them and bring them up, even if they say no when we're in the initial process, they will sometimes decide they want to do it before we start, which is always better. It's better for everyone because then one, they know that cost up front. There's no having to negotiate a change order, and then we're not having to reevaluate our schedule to add something new for them.
that makes sense. So when you're in the execution phase of a job, do you, obviously, sounds like your communication with your clients are great all the way through, but do you have any sort of set, I'll use the word template for lack of a better word, or way that you give updates to your client on the jobs, or is there a standard or a usual?
Yeah, so we have two project managers on the team, including myself. And so what we try to do is communicate with the client at least 3 days a week in person when possible. If they're on site, frequently our clients will go away. And we try to do text updates, send photos, in process if they want them. Sometimes they want to be fully surprised and come home to
The
the
big
the,
reveal. They've
the
been
big
watching
reveal.
TV.
Exactly. But most of the time, being able to send them updates and then say, okay, we're going to be doing these things tomorrow. And we send before the job starts, I send what I call the hopeful tentative schedule, which is like on these days, this is what's going to be happening and this is who's going to be in your house. So they know, okay, well, if we're tiling on Thursday, then that Beth is going to be there, and so is Henry Gomez and Kevin. And these are their phone numbers in case you need to get in touch with them. And so they've got all of that information before we even start the job. And then as the job goes, we try to remind them that okay, so tomorrow we're doing this. Thursday we're going to be doing this. This is what will be happening over the weekend if there will be weekend work. So we try to just as many times as possible say what we're doing, who's going to be there. And then when new people come in, we try to make sure to find the homeowner if they are on site, which they are more and more since the pandemic, and then introduce them to whoever additional subcontractors or folks they haven't met. Make sure they've got one another's phone numbers, that, everybody knows where the bathroom is and, where the water shut off is, just like all of those basics, and just making sure that the homeowner is part of all of as many of those conversations as we can without overwhelming them or exhausting them.
That's awesome. As I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, I wish my parents were going to do any renovations so they could use you. But they live in an apartment building in downtown Baltimore, so I'm not sure that they need much, but I'm going to keep it in mind. And what about any, when you're billing? So I've been the client when I've just gotten regular invoices from my contractor, and I've been a client where I got invoice that came with a monthly, now granted this was for a new build, so it was like a 9-month project, but a monthly statement of values that basically said, here's what we've budgeted for every different piece of the project, here's what we've spent to date, and here's where our money is spent this month that I'm billing you for right now.
Yeah, we don't do that kind of granular billing at this point, partly because our projects are generally less than 2 months. Yeah. And we have the contract is, they pay this much on this date, this much on this date, this much on this date. And then the only bill that changes is the final bill, which is if it's a kitchen, if it's over $40,000, they're going to pay 20% at the end or whatever's left. And I say 20% or whatever's left because whatever's left, if they haven't used the top end of the budget, then that final bill will go down. So we make an allowance for a refrigerator, say for $3,000. And if they bought a fridge that was $2,200, then they're going to get an $800 rebate off that final bill of that final 20%. So we put, they know exactly what they're paying for the first 3 payments, unless there's a change order, which might change that. But, they know those numbers in advance, generally 6 to 9 months in advance of what those costs are going to be, so they can save up for it or whatever, transfer money, whatever they need to do. It's only that final bill that has any real changes to it, which they'll be saving that $200 that they spent on the estimate fee, whatnot.
Got it. So is that what is your average job, would you say, cost wise right now?
Our average bathroom is probably 35 to 38,000 now, and our average kitchen is probably 65 to 70,000. And certainly we've had some that are, in the 40 or 50s number for kitchens, and we've definitely had some that have been higher. And our bathrooms, we just more and more we can't do them for less because we have to level the floor, we have to sister every single joist. It's like these old houses, and folks, if there's one thing I could say to folks getting a bathroom renovated is the smaller the bathroom, the more money. Because folks are like, I don't understand why it's so expensive. It's such a small space. I'm like, yeah, only one person can work in there at a time. A big bathroom, we can do more faster and have more people working. But when there's only room for 1 or 2 people, it's going to take longer. It's going to cost more. Just the only thing every bathroom has the same stuff in it, right? It's got a toilet, it's got a tub, it's got a vanity light, right? Like the only difference is how much tile. But a giant kitchen can be, $40,000 in cabinets or $4,000 in cabinets. Sure, they all have a refrigerator, but the differences in a big kitchen and a small kitchen are massive. But the differences in a big bathroom and a small bathroom are pretty minuscule.
Yeah. So I don't want you to tell tales out of school, but any really big that we haven't talked about already, like pet peeves or horror stories about how homeowners, or I guess hopefully you caught it and you didn't work with them, but things that homeowners do that you're like, oh, I really wish that they would sort of get over it and get with the program and understand, X, Y, or Z about how this process goes.
We've really been super lucky. We've only had one client that I would never work for again. So I think for the most part, it's all stuff that's pretty simple. I think, the main thing is just come with a little bit of grace if you've got a complaint, and wait until we're done before you like complain about finish details. So if you're like, oh, but like that looks rough up there, and it's like, well, yeah, because we haven't actually put the
I've heard
second
that
coat on.
so many times. Yeah, you're like, it's not finished, right?
Right, like I understand if it's like this seems like it's in the wrong location. Certainly tell me before we finish. But like complaining about finish details on like how the trim looks or how it's like just we're not done yet. Like let us get finished. Um, and and I think which is true for us too, is like trying to be thoughtful about when you're giving what feels like criticism. Like if you hear your construction team is down there and they're really struggling, they're having a really hard day, things are not going according to their plan, to come down at the end of that day and have complaints is it's not going to be received as well as if you start at the beginning of a day, at the beginning of a week, and say, hey, I've got some concerns. Can we talk them through? But waiting until the end of the day when folks have maybe not had the best time, it can sometimes not be received as well. And I think that goes the same for us too, right? It's like not hitting somebody in the middle of their workday with some questions about whatever we have for them, trying to be thoughtful about the way we approach them when we've got questions and concerns so that we're not, impacting the way they're dealing with their boss or their kids or whatever.
Absolutely. I talk about the whole idea of granting good intentions. Like
Yeah.
you're not out to give them a bad product. You're
No.
doesn't that would not work for you either. Like you're trying to do what they want. And so I think on both sides, everyone needs to grant that everyone is coming at it from a good place. And you're right, and be thoughtful about how and when. Now, obviously, if something seems egregiously wrong in the moment, you can ask about it, but there's a way to ask about it that's maybe not as critical. And also to understand that you are an expert. And so maybe something you look at it and you think, oh, this isn't exactly what we talked about, but to sort of ask about it instead of coming at it like, oh my gosh, you did this wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Because you could have you could say, look, yeah, I did that wrong. I did that differently because X, Y, and Z. And, that's where the good intentions come in.
Yeah. We try to like, catch that at the pass where if there's something that we had to do differently, that I try to say, hey, look, I want to point this out. This looks a little bit different. Here's why. This is what we found when we opened up the wall or whatever. We weren't able to get a hold of you to talk it through, but like we had to make a decision and this is what we went with. I think this is my professional opinion. This is the best possible, choice for this. And like I said, we're really lucky. Our clients have all been great, with the exception of that one. She can kick rocks.
One whose name we will not
Yeah.
publicize. Yeah, that is very lucky. Do you, I know a lot of contractors feel differently about this, could argue either side. How do you feel about, this is such a small thing, but homeowners bringing lunches or bringing, stuff?
Love it. How could you feel bad about lunches? Free
I had
lunch?
a contractor who said, please don't bring anything to my guys because then they'll never want to leave your job and they'll slow down. And I want to be like, that's your failure, not mine.
Yeah, that seems like a failure in leadership, not a problem for the homeowner. I think like the more my team can feel appreciated by the homeowner, the better they're gonna do. And the more, like I'm a little bit woo-woo about this stuff as I've gotten older, but like the like love and energy that gets put into your house, into your walls, into your fixtures, like you're going to feel that for a long time. And so the more like positive energy that goes into that space, the better it is for everybody. So like if you're feeling like that you want to get lunch for the team, always get lunch for the team. Bring the cookies, coffee, like tips. Oh, like they go crazy for a tip. Everybody loves it. We had one client who every day of the job just asked for the Venmo of a different person who was working and then just sent them like a $25 tip at the end of every day. Just a different person,
Huh.
or they were subcontractors or whatever. And it like the mood, it was a really challenging job. And that's not why they were tipping. They just were really generous, lovely people. But it was a really challenging job and the mood was just so much lighter. Everyone just felt appreciated. And it was just this little thing that like no one had ever done to just like, tip them individually.
And
you
in the
know?
middle, like that's
Yeah,
awesome. Like I would expect to tip, of course, at the end, although maybe doesn't everyone doesn't do that, but I would of course tip at the end of a job. I would never think to do it that way. That's really fun and
yeah.
yeah, that's really lovely.
Super sweet, and it was a proportion, it was like the right amount. It was not like they were going overboard or they were being chintzy. It was just like, it was really sweet because then it was like, oh, well, I'm going to have dinner tonight or I'm going to get a six pack on the client. Sweet Catherine and Michelle, you guys are the best if you're listening. But like I think any of those nice things that you can do that make people feel appreciated. We love to do little weird things like have the homeowner make a playlist that we play while we're doing their job just to get their vibe. We want to like, what's the thing you're going to make the first time that you cook in your new kitchen? We want to think about it. We want to like really just put that energy into the house. And it's a little bit silly, but it's about having a connection with the homeowner more, and having them be a part of the process and have it be fun and not just expensive and messy and disruptive. And, making every day have a little bit of something else that they're excited to like see us.
I think that's so awesome. I think every contractor needs to, go to the Beth Pointer School of how to be a contractor in terms of creating this
I sure hope
amazing
so.
culture.
Yeah, and like have homeowners make a time capsule to hide in the walls so they can think about taking pictures of the neighborhood or what they want to pass on. Just different things to keep them excited throughout the process. It makes everybody happier. It makes the job feel much more like a party.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, as a homeowner and someone who's built from the ground up, when we finished our new build, like we had our contractor, our architect, like anyone who worked on the house over for a big barbecue because we're
Yeah,
like, of course, like you guys did this. Like we didn't, it was a partnership. We did it together. And people seemed so surprised that we were inviting people over to hang out at our house. And we're like, well, yeah, like we've become friends with these people. Like we've
yeah,
been dealing with them for, 7 months now.
yeah. When it goes well, it's a really like intimate, vulnerable relationship for everyone, and I think it's great. I think there's a point in every project where everybody's a little bit sick of each other and we're ready for it to be over. And then after it's done and a week or two have gone by, we all miss each other and we're like so excited. Like today, my wife took me to lunch and we bumped into one of our favorite treasured clients, and I came back to the team and I was like, oh, we ran into Val today. And everyone was like, oh, I'm so jealous. I wish I could see Val. And it's like, we were in her house for a long time. By the end, she was definitely ready to have us out of her house. But like now, we'd love to be in Val's house every day again.
Right. Just a couple more things before I let you go. How many projects do you tend to work on at a time? I mean, I know it probably depends on the size, but what's your average, project load?
We try to do three projects at the same time that are like staggered so that while we've got a subcontractor in there potentially doing drywall on a project, then we're doing the finished carpentry at another project, and then we're doing getting the demo started on another project. So we try to keep them staggered so that my team never has to go a day without work and that the projects never sit with unmanned because we don't really ever want any days that from the day the job starts, the day the job finishes. Maybe we'll let one weekend where no one's in there during the project, but otherwise we want to make sure somebody's in there moving that ball forward every single day.
Yeah, that's great. And being able to do that is really helpful. Once we did a basement renovation at the same time as our next door neighbors, and we were living in a townhouse in Brooklyn at the time. There were these new build townhouses. And so the basements were exactly the same, the original footprint. And we each did slightly different designs to build them out, but we worked with the same contractor. And so it was perfect. Like literally they were right next door and they could just cycle people through. But again, it's, I would say we ultimately had very different experiences with that because I think we approached it in a different way than our neighbors did. And so it was much more enjoyable for us, I think, than for them.
Yeah, I think like so many things, it's the attitude that you take into the thing is kind of what ends up coming out of it.
Yeah.
But I would think it's important to address the folks that there are folks who've had really bad experiences with contractors and it wasn't their fault. And there is frankly a model of contracting that is to make the homeowner so unhappy with you that they will never call you back for warranty work. And from a financial perspective, I understand why that's a smart business model. But from a like karma perspective and a like, this is a small town. I'm going to bump into them at the grocery store. These are my neighbors. Like, there wouldn't be enough therapy to get me through having screwed over a bunch of my neighbors that way, So, but that is that is truly like a financial model that some of these guys, and I say that
Guys on
terminology
purpose. I'm
on
with you.
purpose.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a woman contractor doing that. But it is what some folks do. And I think it's important to be paying attention as a homeowner to that, your gut feeling about a person. And if you feel like this is somebody that you actually trust, and, going back to that sort of dating metaphor, it's like, is this somebody that you really would feel comfortable asking questions, do they have, a little bit of animosity or anger in the back of their voice that you can sense, asking lots of questions. Like, if you're the project manager, are you going to be the project manager on it? Who all is going to be on the team? Asking questions like, when are you going to be able to finish the job? Stuff like that, I think that homeowners can do to, kind of weed out and look for those red flags. But there are some bad ones out there.
Yeah, and I also think, to generalize for a minute, you came at this from union organizing, which gave you like a huge set of skills that you brought with you. Obviously, I'm not a contractor, but I came to this world in this industry, and part of the reason I like it so much is because I came from an event producing background, and so that is so applicable to this world. But a lot of contractors come from from being a skilled tradesperson.
Yeah.
And they are excellent at the trade. But also running a business is a whole different ballgame that if you're never taught how to do it or have the space to sort of develop that piece of your business, then sometimes that really comes out, and that is what causes the problems as well.
Absolutely. I think, not having the project management skills, the communication skills, and I think there's a lot of people who have judgment about folks from a blue collar background, and they've experienced a like lifetime of microaggressions, of classism, and so they come with a chip on their shoulder as well, that they have rightfully earned. But it doesn't necessarily start by giving people the best, grace around their intentions or whatever.
Right. Well, thank you so much. This does make me want to go find some property in Baltimore to renovate, so we could
Come on, let's do it.
And day to day.
Let me know when you're in town next time. Please send me an email, and I will take you out for a chocolate snowball if the season.
Yes, maybe I'd be willing to try egg custard.
You've not even tried an egg custard?
I have not. As a kid, I grew up with Skylight, which for people who don't know, and you shouldn't, it's like this artificial bright blue color. I can't even tell you what it tastes like, but I loved Skylight with marshmallow, chocolate with marshmallow, and vanilla with marshmallow. And like a true Baltimore girl, like I found my thing and I didn't let it go.
Yeah. Egg custard tastes a lot like it's like a vanilla cream soda kind of flavor. Yeah. It's just bright orange. It also, pro tip, tastes good with whiskey in it if you're the type.
Ah, excellent. Good to know. Good to know. I have managed to figure out how to make a homemade chocolate version. Out when you're not in Baltimore, you can't have access to a snowball, but I would not know how to replicate that for other flavors. But yes, we could do a whole podcast just on snowballs, and then debating snowballs versus snow cones versus snow ices, or all those other cheap imitations that other cities.
Yes, cheap imitations indeed.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining. And
thanks for having me.
Listeners are really going to enjoy it. Thanks.
Thanks.